Fossilized sports car. The first amazing abandoned vehicle that was recently discovered is a very rare 1932 sports car that seriously surprised archaeologists while excavating a former artillery post. This happened in the United Kingdom. An archaeological crew had been needed to excavate the post before it was transformed into a new modern housing facility for the military. And it's no wonder they were so surprised by the discovery. A fossilized sports car is definitely not something that archaeologists are used to finding at a dig site. The car would have been an absolutely beautiful 1932 MG J2 midget almost 90 years ago. It was one of only 2,083 models ever made in a span of 2 years. According to the archaeologists who discovered this random car abandoned in the dirt, they believed it was used all the way until the 1960s but was then taken apart to be repaired. For an unknown reason, the car was abandoned before repairs could be made. Then for decades it sat in the dirt at the old artillery post until the archaeologists stumbled upon it totally by accident. This is one of the very first sports cars in history, and it's amazing to think what would have happened if it had stayed in the dirt for another 500 years. What would future archaeologists have made of such a discovery? Oldsmobile limousine. The classic Oldsmobile is pretty much a limousine without being modified into one, and yet somebody did it anyway. The company American Quality Coach was founded in roughly 1968 when two men decided to manufacture coaches based on the original Oldsmobile Tornado from General Motors. These two fellows had an entire line of coaches they wished to build, including ambulances, hearses, and limousines, all built to mimic the Oldsmobile while being larger and more impressive. Their first product that they actually created was the airport limousine, properly titled the AQC Jetway 707. The vehicle was 28 feet long, 8.5 meters, and it had 8 doors, it seated 15 people, and it had twin rear axles. The vehicle also had skylights and an enclosed cargo area. Unfortunately, these two businessmen never got to go ahead with any of their other proposed vehicles. Their capital got tied up in producing the first line of airport limousines, which, by the way, absolutely nobody wanted to buy. Then in 1970, just 2 years after they started, the fellows went bankrupt. To this day, nobody knows how many of the AQC Jetway 707s were built. There have been estimates of between 52 and 150. One of the most recent ones discovered was back in 2015 when someone spotted a Jetway 707 sitting in a random driveway, seemingly abandoned in Nebraska. It was in rough shape and clearly had not been driven. It also might be one of the only ones left in the country. What's the strangest car you've ever ridden in? An old military Humvee? A super teched out limousine? A monster truck even? Tell me about your wildest car experiences in the comments section down below. Then remember to subscribe if you have not already, and keep your browser pointed to Talltanic for more amazing videos. Target 550 Streamliner. The Target 550 Streamliner is most certainly a unique and strange vehicle. Its only purpose in life is to break the record for the fastest wheel drive, piston-powered land vehicle of all time. It was designed with 2 supercharged Dodge engines capable of generating up to 5,000 horsepower. The current record is 470 miles per hour, but the Target 550 is determined to beat it by 80 miles per hour. It has not happened yet, but it just might. The vehicle has been in production for quite some time. The photos you've seen of it sitting in the middle of the salt flats, completely gray like the shell of a spaceship, were from several years ago before it got a proper paint job. While this vehicle has not technically been abandoned in any sense of the word, the scheduled drive to beat the record has certainly been postponed indefinitely. The car is still a fascinating piece of machinery, and we're still waiting to see if it really can break the speed record and hit the targeted 550 miles per hour, which obviously is where the vehicle gets its name from. Right now, it's likely sitting in a garage somewhere collecting dust, waiting for the big day. Abandoned cars and train tunnel. Speaking of cars that go fast, check out this collection of abandoned cars stuck inside of a collapsed train tunnel. According to thedrive.com, the tunnel was an aged piece of infrastructure in England that had been converted into a subterranean vehicle repair shop after the train stopped running. The tunnel was then abandoned in 2012 when a ceiling collapse threatened to plunge the entire tunnel into darkness. Unfortunately, the tunnel suddenly became so dangerous that everything needed to be left behind. This included the cars from the current customers, working projects, and the tools and equipment. Basically, everything inside the tunnel had to be left while the workers escaped with their lives. The tunnel was then sealed. It wasn't until recently that the Drive managed to get a hold of some of the photos of the abandoned vehicles within. The story is fascinating enough, but there are actually some pretty cool vehicles stuck inside the tunnel that will never see the light of day again. There is a Land Rover Series 2, a 1979 Lotus Elite, and even a 1992 Mitsubishi Pajero. Most of these cars have been underground for over 30 years, so they're in understandably horrible condition. But who knows, maybe this tunnel will act like a time capsule, and in 500 years, someone will open it up and find a treasure trove of classic cars still able to be fixed and driven. Soviet missile launcher. While out for a weekend adventure, a man in Russia named Oleg came upon the remnants of something fascinating. He passed into a previously unexplored area of the forest and found signs of human activity. He first encountered a rusty barbed wire fence, and daring to go beyond, he came face to face with rusted trucks from the Soviet Union, abandoned in the middle of the forest. One of these trucks was even an ancient missile launcher. Well, not necessarily a launcher, but it was definitely an army vehicle used to transport ballistic missiles. It even had a launch mechanism in the center of its own console. None of the vehicles functioned any longer, and it looked as though they had been abandoned probably since the early 90s when the Soviet Union collapsed. But still, it's definitely one of the cooler things anyone has found during an ATV ride through the forest. Lamborghini Aventador Roadster. It would be a dream come true to have a Lamborghini Aventador. In fact, just about anyone would be happy to have any kind of Lamborghini, even an old model without an engine sitting in their garage. These are some of the coolest vehicles in the world. That's what makes it so strange that a Lamborghini Aventador Roadster was found abandoned in Abu Dhabi, sitting in a parking garage covered in dust and graffiti. Judging by just how much dust is collected on the Lamborghini, it has probably been abandoned for quite some time. But this is nothing new in the United Arab Emirates. The UAE is the land of supercars, with some of the wealthiest people in the world sporting some of the most expensive cars in existence. It's no surprise that sometimes somebody can't pay the bill and they leave their Lamborghini sitting in a parking garage for someone else to deal with. It's sad, but it's true. But perhaps what's really sad is that the Lamborghini is not getting any action collecting dust. This is one car that really deserves to be driven. Abandoned trolley. Believe it or not, somebody tried to bring trolleys back to Brooklyn. It was a horribly failed experiment that ended in disaster, and now there is only one trolley left sitting on the Red Hook waterfront, tucked just out of sight behind the Beard Street warehouses. This decaying blue trolley was one of 17 decommissioned trolleys collected by two guys who started the Brooklyn Historic Railway Association. These are the two people who wanted to bring trolleys back to Brooklyn. However, the city put the kibosh on the plan before it could ever start. The rail tracks were removed, and then the road was paved over in 2004, erasing any hope of reinstating the trolleys. Most of the trolleys were then confiscated and deposited in an unknown location. The only one remaining is this blue trolley cart slowly rusting away on the waterfront. It's a 3303 Boston T Green Line car that dates back to 1951. Ukraine's space-age saucer. In the country of Ukraine, there is a giant abandoned saucer. It's located in Kiev, on the outskirts of the country's capital. It's a hidden relic not known to many people that dates back to the days of the Soviet Union. Many years ago, it was considered the most innovative structure of its kind. It's not actually a flying saucer, but from above it definitely looks like something that would come from outer space, or something that would have been used as an alien aircraft in an episode of Star Trek. It was actually a bus garage, but it was built in the likeness of a flying saucer. The garage is currently abandoned, and the story behind it is actually pretty sad. The car garage opened in 1973 and was supposed to be an enormous car garage that would service all the city of Kiev. It took 80 years to build the garage, more than 180 steel cables to hold up the roof, and it was even used in April 1986 when 70 buses stationed underneath the giant saucer were drafted to evacuate the residents of Pripyat after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. But like everything else in Eastern Europe, the end of the Soviet Union in 1991 proved to be disastrous. International routes were cancelled, Ukraine went into an economic crisis, and the lack of funds and necessity resulted in the terminal being largely abandoned, along with many of its buses. But the station is still standing. You can even visit the dead flying saucer and its dozens of abandoned buses on any trip to Ukraine. Two-Wheeled Gyro Car. The story behind the Wolseley-Shalovsky gyro car is absolutely insane. The vehicle was originally designed by a Russian count. The whole idea behind it was that it would be a normal car with only two wheels stabilized by a gyroscope in the center. Keep in mind, this was back in the early 1900s when motor vehicles were still in their baby phase. The vehicle ended up being built by Wolseley in the United Kingdom back in 1913. Surprisingly, the car actually worked. It was not able to navigate sharp turns, but it actually stayed upright thanks to the gyroscope. Like everything else on our list, course, though, this car just did not work out. The First World War was looming and people didn't have time to be developing wonky cars with wonky technology. It was all about military vehicles, so for whatever reason, the executives at Wolseley in London decided to dig a giant hole and throw the gyro car into it. That's definitely one weird way of abandoning a vehicle. Then in 1938, Morris Motors, who had purchased the original company that built the gyro car, decided to dig it out of the ground. However, the gyro car still did not last long. After it was dug out of the ground, the top brass at the company decided it was a silly endeavor and scrapped it for parts. The American Dream Limo. The American Dream Limo epitomizes all the glory of wealth that a single person can handle. The American Dream Limousine was built by heavily modifying a 1970s Cadillac Eldorado to create the longest limousine ever. This vehicle was 100 feet, 30 meters from bumper to bumper. There were 72 seats inside and more amenities than in most people's houses. It used 2 motors and actually had to be driven by a pair of drivers. There was 1 driver in the back and 1 driver in the front. The American Dream Limo was even able to host a helicopter on the back landing pad, which doubled as a hot tub. The car was completed in 1992 and was the pinnacle of extravagance. Unfortunately, the big issue with the car was that it could only be driven in a straight line. It could not turn even a little bit. The car was made to be detachable in the midsection so that it can break into 2 vehicles for easier parking at the end of a long and straight ride. It was eventually seen as completely redundant and entirely useless and was abandoned in a warehouse in New Jersey. It wasted away until 2014 when the American Dream Limo was sent to the AutoZeum Automotive Teaching Museum in New York to be used for teaching students how to fix broken cars. Which of these amazing vehicles would you love to restore and drive yourself? A tropical spider. The human body is a fascinating place, and sometimes things end up inside of us that don't quite belong. Take the story of Dylan Thomas, a young guy in his 20s who had to have a tropical spider surgically removed from his body during a vacation to Bali. And to answer your first question, no, he did not get any superpowers. What he got instead was a very cool story to tell for the rest of his life. But how did Dylan get a tropical spider inside of him? Well, it all happened when Thomas visited the doctor after waking up with a huge red scar-like mark going from his belly button up to his chest. The doctor told him that it was just an insect bite and to put some cream on it. But a few days later, the scar began to blister. Thomas then visited a dermatologist who immediately realized that something horrifying was going on. Some tests were done and it turned out there was a tropical spider living inside of him for at least 3 days. Luckily, the spider was dead when it was removed, and as of the time the story was published, experts were still waiting for tests to see exactly what species of spider it was. It was also unclear how exactly the spider managed to get inside of him, and some people online even claim that Dylan was just a big fat liar and made up the whole story. According to a report from the Bunbury Mail, Dylan was recently trying to raise money for a Spider-Man tattoo as commemoration for the experience. Have you ever been bitten by a spider? What happened? Did you have to go to the hospital? Tell me in the comments below. Then remember, if you haven't subscribed already, to go ahead and subscribe to Talltanic for more cool videos just like this one. Pea Plant in the lung. A man in Massachusetts was rushed to the hospital when his lung collapsed. He had been battling emphysema for several months and his condition deteriorated suddenly. After his visit to the hospital, the Massachusetts man was prepared for a cancer diagnosis. This is because x-rays taken after his lung collapsed revealed a growth inside of his lung. But what looked like cancer turned out to be a pea plant growing inside of his lung. This was not the prognosis that anyone saw coming. Doctors believe that the patient at some point swallowed a pea, but it went down the wrong tube. The pea then decided that it would just go ahead and grow inside of the guy's lung. By the time the plant was removed, it was about half an inch, 1 centimeter in size. The good news here, of course, is that the guy did not have cancer, but unfortunately he still had emphysema. As for the pea plant, it turns out that peas can grow basically anywhere. Who would have thought that the inside of a human lung would be the perfect greenhouse? 78 forks and spoons. We've all heard of people with strange eating habits. Some people have a love for eating soap, some people enjoy eating foreign foods, and then there's the woman who was obsessed with eating cutlery. While not many of us probably see the allure in chomping down on spoons and forks, this woman ate them like popcorn. According to Fox News, she actually had to go under the knife, no pun intended, to remove 78 forks and spoons that were stuck inside of her stomach. The doctor said that every time Margaret Dahlman, who was from Rotterdam in Holland, sat down to eat a meal, she instead ignored the food and ate the silverware. The woman was 52 years old when she eventually had to get hospitalized because of severe pain in her stomach. A quick X-ray revealed the dozens of implements inside of her, and surgery successfully removed them. This is obviously the strangest and possibly most dangerous compulsion a person can have. According to Margaret herself, she felt an urge to eat the silverware and could not help herself. Luckily, she was smart enough not to swallow any knives, and so nothing ended up piercing her stomach wall and causing major damage. She eventually was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And according to the report from Fox News, Margaret has made a complete recovery from the surgery and is responding well to her therapist. She is also not eating forks and spoons anymore, and hopefully she does not start again anytime soon. Wedding ring. This next story fits into a few different categories. Yes, it's a bizarre thing found in a person's body, but it's also one of the stupidest crimes ever committed. It all happened in 2011 when a man tried to make off with a diamond wedding ring that he had stolen from a couple's home. The man from Chicago actually swallowed the wedding ring before it could be retrieved by its owner. According to ABC News, the man's name is Wilfred Gonzalez, and he was doing a remodeling project for a couple when he asked if he could use the bathroom of their home. But after his trip to the bathroom, the woman of the house realized that her diamond ring was missing. Her husband confronted the man, the two got into a fight, and the suspect took the ring from his shoe and stuffed it into his mouth. This was obviously completely ridiculous, and when police arrived, Gonzalez confessed to stealing the ring. He ended up having to do an X-ray. He was taken to the local hospital, and the expensive diamond ring was spotted inside of his stomach. The end of the story is kinda hilarious, as Gonzalez was taken to jail and stuffed in a room with a bedpan. The authorities gave him a laxative and waited for him to poop out the ring, which happened at around 4 a.m. The ring was then returned to the couple, and hopefully they gave it a good washing before it was put back on the woman's finger. As for the thief, he appeared in court and had a bail set for $10,000. 350 coins. The woman who ate 78 pieces of cutlery was quite obviously insane, but meet the man who was admitted to a hospital in France after coming down with some stomach pains because he ate 350 coins, a few different necklaces, and even some needles. This guy also had a history of psychiatric illness. He was 62 years old when admitted to the hospital, complete with a swollen stomach. He could not eat and he couldn't go to the toilet. Doctors at the hospital were absolutely floored when they discovered a mass the size of a bowling ball inside his stomach. Apparently, the family of the man had warned doctors previously of his habit for swallowing coins, and he had even had some removed from his stomach in previous hospital visits. Fortunately, the guy was admitted to surgery 5 days after arriving at the hospital, and surgeons were able to take the coins out of his stomach. They found an equivalent of 4,050 francs inside his belly. Doctors believe that he had been swallowing coins for at least 10 years. The objects became so heavy that they pushed the man's stomach all the way down to between his hips. It was basically like eating weights, and they really messed up his body. So far as doctors could surmise, the man just really liked eating coins. He even had a habit of stealing coins from other people and eating them. Surgical scissors. Get ready for a horror story. Surgery is not an easy thing to undergo. There are so many things to worry about, like the surgery going wrong, the anesthesia not being applied properly, and now apparently we all need to be worried that doctors will accidentally leave their surgical instruments inside of us. That's because a man in Vietnam recently needed to have a pair of scissors removed from his stomach 18 years after a surgeon accidentally left them inside during an operation. This is definitely the most negligent thing that a surgeon has probably ever done and probably ever could do. What's even more fascinating is that the man probably wouldn't have known about the scissors. He only went to the hospital because of a road accident. The doctors took an ultrasound test and were shocked to find the scissors lodged in one side of the man's abdomen. They were not ordinary scissors either, but a pair of surgical forceps. According to the report from Global News, the hospital that found the forceps was the same hospital where this guy had had his surgery in 1998. Doctors removed the instrument from his body in yet another surgery, and they acknowledged the incident on state television, but denied any wrongdoing on their part, claiming that medical records from 18 years ago were no longer available. Maggot myosis. Myosis is one of the most horrendous medical terms known to man. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or the CDC for short, myosis is an infection of fly larvae. It normally happens in a tropical or subtropical area when a person accidentally ingests larvae from a fly, either through an open wound or sore, through the nose, or through the ears. This can also occur when a person is bitten by a mosquito or other type of fly that then embeds their larva inside the wound. It's an absolutely horrendous condition that essentially ends up with maggots being hatched inside of a human body. It can happen inside of a wound, and it can essentially make the area of your body rot while the maggots eat you from the inside out. Anyone who has gone traveling to a tropical area has probably heard of this awful condition. And guess what? It really does happen. In Hong Kong, health officials just recently reported 2 human cases, one in January and another in February. The first case involved a 99-year-old elderly resident who was admitted to a public hospital after her gums swelled and started bleeding. A surgical examination found an oral ulcer and a deep cavity filled with maggots. Basically, the woman had somehow ended up with maggots being hatched inside of an ulcer in her mouth. Now that's disgusting. Bone, teeth, hair. Let's keep it going with another disgusting story. A teenager in Indiana was rushed to the hospital because of a bizarre mass protruding from her abdomen, but you'll never believe what it was. After some investigation, the doctors found an enormous hunk of bone, teeth, and hair inside her abdomen. According to the doctors, the large mass was actually her twin. This is a very rare condition known as fetus in fetu. For the previous 5 years, the girl explained to doctors that she had been developing a lump in her abdomen and it had been increasing in size. She sometimes felt abdominal pain and often felt full even when she hadn't eaten a lot of food. Apparently, she had been part of 2 fetuses while in the womb, but she had absorbed the other fetus and was born perfectly healthy. But rather than the other fetus perishing, it continued to grow inside of her body. This is one of only 7 cases where this has happened to a person over the age of 15. It's such a bizarre medical issue that scientists don't even know what causes it to happen. Luckily, the teenager received a surgery and was okay after the doctors removed what was essentially a hairball of teeth and bone the size of a baby. The teen is expected to make a full recovery. A house key. Sometimes things happen when we drink too much and we can't remember them. Well, Chris Foster had no memory of swallowing his door key after a night of drinking with his friends. The young man was only 18 years old when this happened. After spending the night on a friend's couch, he could not find his key. Then he started feeling unusually unwell. Chris ended up having to go to the hospital because of horrible pain in his throat and a strange sensation in his stomach. An X-ray then revealed his door key sitting peacefully in his stomach. Luckily, there was no surgery required. Doctors sent the boy home, told him to let nature do its thing, and 31 hours later, Chris got his key back. Of course, he did have to thoroughly rinse the key afterwards, and he probably won't make the silly decision of swallowing his key ever again. Wouldn't want to put it in his mouth after that. Let this be a lesson to all the party goers out there. Don't swallow your keys. Knife in the head. When most people get stabbed in the head, they die. However, a man from Harlem ended up being extremely lucky after he escaped a stabbing with just a few minor injuries and a kitchen knife stuck in his scalp. A video was uploaded online that showed the gory aftermath of the attack. The man can be seen in the video talking calmly to the mortified onlookers while a kitchen knife stuck out from the top of his head. It looked like he couldn't even feel it. According to eyewitnesses, the man didn't even want to get into the ambulance and refused to tell anyone his name. But according to the police, the kitchen knife didn't actually penetrate the guy's skull, and that ultimately saved his life. It instead got wedged inside the flesh of his head. He was eventually taken to Harlem Hospital and was later listed in stable condition. The stabbing had apparently been from a domestic squabble in which the female companion of the man stabbed him directly in the head with a knife. It's unclear exactly what happened to the woman, but it's safe to say the pair probably will not be getting back together. Godzilla. Everyone knows you're not supposed to release your pets into the wild, and you're definitely not supposed to throw your goldfish into a random pond. But just why not? First of all, goldfish typically don't last very long in the wild. If you flush them down the toilet, they usually die from the shock of the water. But if you release your goldfish into a pond in Kentucky, apparently it will turn into a monster. In Danville, Kentucky, a fisherman recently found a goldfish that weighed 20 pounds. It's unclear if the goldfish was at one point a pet, but it was clearly thriving in the pond. According to the fisherman who caught the goldfish, it was the biggest he ever saw. This is obviously incredible since most goldfish weigh less than 1 pound. Apparently, goldfish are generally constrained in size by the tank they live in and the amount of food you feed them. If you let them loose in an environment with lots of space and abundant food, they may grow far larger than you ever imagined. However, the fish may not have been a goldfish after all. According to a biologist, it may have actually been a type of koi fish. Nonetheless, you still shouldn't throw your goldfish into a pond lest it turns into Goldzilla. Ferrets. You should definitely never release your ferret into the wild. Even though these strange creatures are extremely popular pets, many people end up getting sick of them because they stink and can be kind of annoying depending on what kind of pet owner you are. But that does not mean you should just let it roam free. According to wildlife experts, pet ferrets rarely survive more than a few days in the wild. They simply do not have the instincts required to make a life outside on their own. And while there is a wild species of ferret known as the black-footed ferret, they are rare, endangered, and not domesticated. Ferrets have actually been bred for at least 2,500 years as domesticated animals, so they have no place in the wild, and unlike their relatives, which are wolverines and weasels, they simply will not last outside and will typically become a predator's meal within the week. Coyotes, birds of prey, or even large wildcats might try to eat your pet ferret if you let it out in the wild. Parrots. Parrots are about as popular as ferrets, but these birds are ridiculously more annoying if you like peace and quiet. Parrots squawk, and all their squawking has led to people simply releasing them outside to get rid of them. And while some species have bred successfully in the wild, others are less fortunate and will probably perish very quickly. But in fact, escaped pet parrots are taking over the United States of America. According to the Smithsonian Magazine, a new study has found that at least 25 species of parrots not native to America are breeding in at least 23 states. So even though you shouldn't let your parrot fly out the window, depending on which state you live in, it may make some friends outside. There are at least 56 parrot species found across the US, and they're almost all because of pet birds either escaping or being released. And even though this may seem like a great thing, introducing a foreign species into an ecosystem is never a good idea. Even though they may be more colorful than gray pigeons that seem to live everywhere, they aren't a part of the ecosystem naturally, and so can disrupt the native animal populations with their presence. The lesson here is that you should not contribute to the growing parrot problem in the United States. Keep your windows closed. Have you ever owned an exotic pet? Tell me about it. Was it a parrot, or a snake, or a small mammal, or something else entirely? Or did you own a very rare breed of dog? Leave a comment with your story down below. Then remember to subscribe to Talltanic if you haven't already for more amazing videos just like this one. Exotic pets. This one should go without saying. Exotic pets should under no circumstance be released into the wild. Specifically, tigers, lions, and other ferocious predators have no business wandering around on their own. There is no better example of exotic pets being released than the 2011 Zanesville disaster. It all started when Terry Thompson, the owner of the wildlife sanctuary, released all of his animals into the wild. But what happened next was an absolute massacre. Sheriffs arrived at the scene to find tigers, bears, and lions wandering off on their own, some of them headed for the highway and others heading for town. Having no other choice, officers were forced to exterminate the wildlife using their pistols. According to a sheriff who had been part of the massacre, at times some officers were basically doing hand-to-hand combat with the animals. During a single night of chaos, a lion killed a monkey, bears and lions were attacking local horses, and over 49 animals needed to be slaughtered, including 18 Bengal tigers, 17 lions, 3 mountain lions, 2 wolves, and even a baboon. It was truly sad to see all of these majestic wild animals be put down because they were released into the wrong environment by an irresponsible owner. The lesson here is that exotic animals have no business roaming around rural Ohio. Constrictor snakes. Perhaps one of the most released exotic pets is the boa constrictor. Many different types of constrictor snakes have become wildly popular since the beginning of the 2000s in the US. They're cheap to buy, you can pick them up at almost any pet store, and they're really cute when they're small. The problem is that constrictor snakes grow to be absolutely massive. Some of these snakes grow to be around 10 feet, 3 meters in length, and are extremely vicious. You should never release your constrictor snake into the wild for several different reasons. One of the reasons is that children, pets, and others are often attacked by random constrictor snakes. These creatures, when released, can do pretty much whatever they want. They will curl up in a stranger's garden, sneak into a random person's house and attack their baby, and other nefarious things. And it's not the snake's fault, it's just their nature. Since 1990, at least 4 babies and 3 other children have been squeezed to death by large constrictor snakes in the United States of America, according to the Humane Society. Some youngsters have even been attacked while playing in their backyards. You should by no means ever release one of these dangerous animals into the wild, as 9 times out of 10 they will terrorize the public. Giant lizards. Oddly enough, there is now an invasive species of giant lizards crawling around the United States, threatening native wildlife. This giant lizard is the Argentine black and white tegu, and it's a native of South America. Their main diet consists of the eggs laid by ground nesting birds. They can grow up to be about 4 feet, 1.3 meters, and weigh over 10 pounds. They are also wildly popular pets with weird people who want unique, strange animals as their companions. But no matter how much these people claim to love their pets, sometimes these big lizards become too much to handle and people release them into the wild. Tegu lizards are indeed legal as pets, but letting them roam free is frowned upon. According to CNN, the Department of Natural Resources in Georgia is investigating what could be a population burst of these animals. If caught, tegus are typically euthanized as they do not belong in the United States. For this reason alone, you should never release your giant lizard into the wild. Alligators. There are certainly some parts of the United States where you expect alligators to be roaming free. However, Michigan is not one of these places. But nonetheless, as of 2019, escaped pet alligators were on the loose and causing havoc in the state of Michigan. According to the Detroit Free Press, pet alligator escapes are actually on the rise. In July alone, at least 6 of the scaly creatures were spotted wandering free. They typically pop up in lakes, they skulk through people's yards, and they even crawl across the road. This is obviously not great considering alligators are not supposed to be living in Michigan. Because people don't expect them to be there, they aren't typically looking for them when going on a nice summer swim in the local river or lake. But here's the deal. Authorities estimate there are thousands of pet alligators all across Michigan, and when people get overwhelmed by their size or get bored of them, they simply let them out. And no, this is not a good idea. The last thing you want is your freed pet alligator getting enormous and eating your neighbor's baby. Cats. There is not much you can do that would be crueler than releasing your house cat into the wild. This happens a lot. People move, people get sick of smelling cat litter, or people just open up the door because they think their cat will have fun outside. But this is an absolutely horrific thing to do. Keep in mind that every domesticated cat has gotten used to eating food from a bowl and receiving treats in the morning. Letting your cat roam free is typically a death sentence. Your cat will probably be killed by actual feral cats who grew up on the streets. Some driver who isn't paying attention might run your cat over with their car, or the cat will simply die because it does not understand how to hunt. It's actually quite tragic, and rather than sending your precious kitty out into the wild to die, it's always suggested that you give it to a friend or at least take it to a shelter. Life in the wild for a house cat is not quite as much fun as you might assume it to be. Rabbits. Releasing a pet rabbit into the wild is essentially the same as releasing a house cat into the wild. It's basically a death sentence. However, depending on where you live and what kind of predators are around, sometimes rabbits can thrive. If a rabbit encounters another rabbit and they like each other, chances are they're going to breed. And in some places throughout North America, released pet rabbits have resulted in massive population explosions, and this permanently alters the normal wildlife balance. It can attract predators, it might destroy a small ecosystem, and sometimes there can be animal disease outbreaks caused by all the rabbits. Local authorities are usually called in to deal with the problem, and this leads to a massive extermination of the invasive rabbits. It's not a pleasant situation. Interestingly enough, when you release a pet rabbit into the wild, even though it has been domesticated, it will retain 2 of its core instincts. First, your pet rabbit will always dig a burrow so that it can hide and sleep. Your pet rabbit will also always behave like a prey species, instinctively avoiding any potential predator and any situation where it could be preyed upon. However, your pet rabbit has no experience running from predators and will probably be eaten by a fox or coyote or even a hawk. Cows. It might seem like no big deal to simply release a herd of cows and let them roam free through the fields and wilderness. However, this is not a good idea. There's no better example of how dangerous it is to release domesticated cows into the wild than when animal rights activists released 71,000 cows in western Wisconsin back in 1998. It was done by a radical group called Animal Liberation Front, and they freed the cows from their human captors with disastrous consequences. One of the ALF members told local news that cows would finally be freed to run through the wilderness. But of course, within hours of the cows being released, police departments all throughout the area began receiving some very disturbing reports. Within just one night, 43 cows were hit by cars and 11 cows fell off of bridges and drowned. Plus, 3 cows were electrocuted by chewing on power lines. This is definitely a lot worse than standing around eating grass all day. The animal liberators actually loaded many of the cows into trucks and then drove 100 miles to free them in the clearing of a forest, but because they had no idea of the consequences of their actions, it ended in tragedy. In any case, don't let anyone's pet cow or domesticated farm animal out into the wild, lest you want it to fall off a bridge. Do you have an opinion on which animals should be let out into the wild? Or how we can better protect all animals, both wild and domesticated? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe for all the latest videos and come back soon.